I continue.
Yes.
I continue. Okay. Okay, do we have the call to order? What's that?
You.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, call to order. Okay, acceptance of minutes from the May 22nd, 2025 meeting. Do we have a motion to accept the minutes?
I will make a motion that we accept the minutes from the May 2025 meeting as
Okay.
they stand, if no one has changes.
Okay, we have a second. Do we have any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. The next item, the first item actually on the agenda, Portsmouth Middle School 8th grade solar projects. Do we have to talk about that?
I don't know if you want to speak.
So I could briefly, I think this is the third year that the it's Chris Rose, correct?
Chris Rose and Nicole Stoner.
Thank you. Two teachers, both 8th grade teachers in the middle school, had sent the city council their students' proposals for solar arrays. It started when Chris had just emailed me asking essentially what to do with them, and I said, send it to the city council. And then the council referred it here, so it's our third year now. I doubt everyone's had an opportunity to read them.
Peruse them.
So the options are we could either discuss what we liked about them now, or we could hold off till next month where everyone's had a chance to review them and then just talk about them more thoroughly. But overall, I am very impressed, as I always am, that these are 8th grade students putting forward whether it's rooftop solar arrays, just places here in town where they think solar can make the most difference. So it's
Josh, a question.
Yeah.
I wondered if we could have some students or Chris or Nicole come to the next meeting.
we could ask, it is the middle of summer,
Yeah.
so I don't know if we'd get any students. And
Did they come at a different time? Because I feel like in the past Chris has been here and last year, I think he had 2 students with him. What did you, was the timing different?
I don't recall, like, we just got these, not the past meeting, but the first meeting in June, so I'm not sure if the timing's different on his part.
Reached out to Nicole last Friday to see if she or Chris Rose could come with some kids, but I haven't heard back. I think they're just wrapping up with all the school stuff. Yeah.
Nicole's last name.
Stonebrook.
Stonebrook. Brook. No, and they both teach science.
Yeah,
Yeah.
grade science. Excuse me. Who's doing the minutes?
I am.
Josh.
Best I can on an iPad.
Well, I agreed with Josh's idea to postpone it a month.
And I believe, Josh, if I remember correctly, we were talking about having youth come to this meeting. And we'd always done with the high school, and I don't know if we were, but I think youth, if you start at whatever, if there were a student who was in middle school and wanted to be kind of as a backup to the high school, or they might even be more active, because what I think the student representative, one, we do a service in terms of, I think, doing some mentorship of what a committee's like, and they give ideas that would be useful. So in the conversation, whoever is talking to Chris or Nicole, I would love to get their opinion, whether they think that's too much of an ask for a night meeting for those, or is there somebody that might be appropriate or not? I don't know if other people have thoughts on that.
Yeah, even if they come by Zoom, that could be something that's.
Yeah, come in by Zoom, yeah.
Give feedback. I don't know if we want to try to refer a couple projects back to city council or work with middle schoolers on certain projects to try to get them to go further. I don't know what sort of our end game is with these, but it'd be good to talk about that.
Did the city council have any reaction to the document?
We didn't speak to them in any depth. I think that meeting went on. It started, I think at 5:30 and the meeting itself started at 7, went 4.5 hours. So by the time it came up, there was not much.
It's interesting, 3 of the 6 proposals are for the Jones Ave solar site, the capped landfill. 3 out of the 6, so I thought that was interesting.
So what I think, everybody is, I think, overwhelmed with stuff coming at them, both data and commitments and things that need attention. So what I'm hearing, if you already looked at these 3, when we're looking for our presentation to the city council, it might be nice to have this as a little footnote that either is supportive or something, so that we're not making it as a project by itself, but incorporating in what we're gonna be talking about tonight, the cap and what we're gonna. Sorry. And that, I think, I'm always quick to get ideas, but I don't wanna make it more complicated than it is.
I would just concur first that if an 8th grade student wanted to come here, that would be fantastic. To the point about the high school student, we do still have somebody who is interested. She just, I think,
Summer.
yeah, summer, but she asked me when the July one was. She said she was out of town tonight, so she couldn't make it tonight. But I haven't heard anything further. She said, I understand if you need someone else who's available more often, but I hope that these are the only conflicts, so she sounds interested and willing to participate. I think it's just kind of the initial
Her
get.
name is,
Emily Wentworth, she goes by Emmy. As per her emails, I've only emailed with her.
And was she delegated by the school's eco club or?
She was not, I found her through another student, Nathan, what's Nathan's last name? Nathan Delaney, who is the class president. And so he recommended her as somebody who would be interested in doing it. Because we weren't having much success with Eco Club, so kind of put it out to some broader feelers.
Yep, good.
My only other thought, I think sort of in line with what Bert was suggesting, I wonder if there's any way that the 8th graders would want to be interested in any of the CAP actions that we're working on, if any of if they would just like, like maybe the part of the zoning or some piece that might not directly connect with what they're proposed, but tangentially, they might just be interested to be part of that process a little bit more and see how it actually works.
I think especially if we get into researching any of these topics, that might give them a nice project and a chance for us to be encouraging them, and it works out mentoring.
And from what Chris has shared, it sounds like they do a ton of research for these projects already. So they're probably pretty knowledgeable and could probably offer some things they've learned.
it has occurred to me that when a high school representatives have been here, when they've been functioning in a way that I thought was most functional for them and us, we weren't really giving them projects or managing them or even consciously mentoring them. But they came because of their own interest in sustainability. And so when something was brought up, like any one of us, they kind of took it on. So when I like what you're saying about, if they were, just say a middle school was here tonight, and we brought up something about mini transportation, they might pick that up and want to go back and do it. So, because I'm looking how to make it I'm seeing a representative as a co-equal rather than us being in a classroom saying, I just want to clarify that for myself, because I don't know if I was clear. They come as a representative, they represent their own age, and then they can go. Does that make any sense, or was that already? worded?
It may depend on the individual, and what works for them.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Do we want to have boundaries ourselves? Because I'm saying my preference would be to have somebody here as a representative, and they're more autonomous than us giving them assignments and that.
Yeah.
But I might be more sensitive to that than others.
Yeah, I think we have to reach the students through the two teacher contacts that we have. And if they can come to a meeting, that's great. But beyond that, it's been so hard to track down students. I'm not sure that's a good use of our time. They're welcome to come. I would love to see them here, but and I'm also concerned with the students' privacy. They're starting high school, you know, all we have is names. I don't know these students. But I do think we just got the proposals early this week and people haven't had time to read them. So I think we should take a month. And I think last year what we did was, aside from having Chris and a couple of students come, we did a letter to them and the city council saying what a great project it was, and we encouraged the city to follow along on Jones Ave if possible.
Fine.
Yeah.
I think we have Colleen that wants to say something. Colleen?
Effie kind of covered it just in terms of, that was you speaking right now, right, Effie?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I was going off the voice, but I wasn't totally sure. Yeah, just in terms of the committee's time, like if students are interested, awesome. It's great that they have the option, but I don't think we need to necessarily be tracking them down. If there was a middle schooler who wanted to join the committee, I think it would be appropriate to have some sort of buddy system. Like high schoolers don't necessarily need that, but someone who can work with them on the projects, you know, if they're really interested in, you know, biking, maybe for the biking project, they would be paired with an existing adult committee member who can help facilitate things, help do the research, just support them. That was all I was gonna say. Yep.
Anyone else? Okay, should we move on? Okay, the next item is community engagement. The first under that is climate conversations update.
Oh, July 31st is that the next one? There's nothing in June, right?
Nope.
July 31st, 6:30 to 8 PM is the next one on Bright Action. We've got some meeting materials that the Bright Action outreach group has given us to sort of format a workshop on getting people who aren't familiar with the platform into working groups and learning how to do it, and then coming back out and sort of talking about what they've learned and what they're interested in. So still kind of fine tuning that, and it would be great if a group of us is sort of, I don't know how available everybody is, but to help kind of teach the workshop and get people involved. But hopefully we can start doing outreach soon with the newsletter and different email groups.
31st or 21st?
31st.
Which is a
Thursday?
change from the original day.
So I can
Right.
come on the 31st. I'm
good.
glad because I
Okay, good.
couldn't come on the 30th.
Because I did reach out to Effie, Fred, and Herb. And the 30th didn't work for Effie, but it works on the 31st, which is
Yes, the
great. And
31st is fine, thanks.
works for Fred on the 31st. We talked on Wednesday at the Portsmouth Climate Action about that, and I guess that was a week ago, and wanted to make ourselves available to help you anyway
I was gonna
we
beg.
can on this. I think the way it's described here is pretty much the way we were thinking with an overview and content presentation and maybe up, just where are we on the cap, just as a
Yeah. brief
early
update.
update that you or Peter or Peter
Yeah,
could do.
we're gonna try to reach some different groups this time, see if we can spread out our reach to who we can get to come to the meeting, but we might also try to do, I don't know how you guys have been doing Zoom or virtual logins from afar.
We have managed to do that with the library's help. 'Cause
With
they-
the owl and everything?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe I'll
What
ask
we, what
Margaret.
we didn't succeed the last time, I think the last one was, no, it wasn't the transportation, on the transportation one, I think we tried to record it, but we some
Yeah, we were, yeah,
glitches with the library.
the problem was, I was trying to use the Portsmouth Climate Action Zoom account to do the recording. I
Mhm.
didn't have the right credentials to set it up. But if we use the library, they have that all set up, so they can
Great.
record, they can,
Perfect.
use it and record it.
We were thinking that if there were breakouts, one way to do it would be to pick 3 priority topics and have someone with some topic knowledge in Bright Action say, okay, here's one for waste, and maybe it's Jess or EB's Fred or transportation more generally, me, just as one way of doing the breakouts, and then have a report back. It would be a chance to have the participants try it out and
Mhm.
think a bit about their footprint and the Bright Action
Yeah,
actions that they might take, and just play around with it with support from,
yeah, that'd be great.
you, Jess, Effie, Fred, me. I'm less of a hands-on on Bright Action, but if we wanted to do topics, I'd get up to speed enough to
That
do it.
works. The format for what Bright Action kind of gives out as like a meeting in a box is kind of that idea of breaking out into topics, or people sort of do a quick run through of all the strategies and pick out ones that they really relate to. Talk about how they might be able to achieve that, then dive into that with groups.
So I don't know what next steps are, but if you like to touch base, coordinate on an agenda, I mean, that's not the most pressing thing. Probably the most pressing thing is getting in sync with Christie and the library and their
Yeah.
newsletter and
Yeah,
the
library
city's
newsletter.
social media, the city
So
manager's
we
newsletter.
have 84 people roughly registered for Bright Action.
It's up to 90 now.
Oh,
Yeah, that's a
So
a list to distribute
I don't
to.
know if we can convince some of them to come, but that's a good way to bring new people on if,
Yeah, most of them are on our MailChimp
okay.
distribution list. But I'll have to check the ones that registered more recently, make sure they're on our MailChimp.
Right.
One of the trickiest things has been to get in sync with the library, because often they want some material or write-ups or
For the
graphics.
newsletter,
Well, at least a poster of some kind.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, you can do that,
You anticipate having a poster, Kate?
of course. Now I am. I
yeah,
think
we have more resources probably than we do.
Yeah, well, I think they gave us a bunch of different graphics, but I think we also made one for the sustainability fair that we can tweak to. So, well, yeah, poster, that's a great idea.
But be sure you're in sync with Christie and her deadlines.
Okay, and Christine Fries, the library director?
Christie,
Bryant,
Oh,
Right.
Brian, okay.
the
library.
programming director, the library, because then they end up being a co-sponsor along with the city, Portsmouth Climate Action, and the library, which is great.
I just wanted to acknowledge that Tori Brooks is here. We're really
She's
glad to see
Yeah.
Tori. She's a longtime committee member. And most of the people here. I don't know that you know Nancy Noveline Claber from the school board.
Okay, I think we overlapped one meeting, but great to see you again.
And Marta Hergen is sampling the committee, so everyone's on their best behavior tonight.
bite-sized sampler.
Yeah. And Tyler, your last name, I'm sorry.
Tarzo.
Okay.
And we've overlapped a little.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I
Just a
think
couple
you, yeah,
meetings, yeah.
okay, great.
Thank you, Effie.
Well, yeah, I think that's finished. It's still being planned, but it's good to keep in touch with the PCA group, I think.
Yeah.
And the other thing we talked about at the PCA meeting was if you could come to one of our meetings in July.
Yeah,
At least-
sorry, I meant to go to the June 18th one and then we just did not have anything for that, so.
Right, no, just to kind of talk about logistics and everything, and you can have people, you know, volunteer to bring cookies and stuff like that. And decide
The
who's gonna-
next one is next
Yeah.
week,
Should be July 2nd, yeah.
Wednesday.
So is it the first and the third Wednesdays of the month?
Third.
Okay,
That-
sure.
A couple of meetings I gotta plan in July, so I'm a little behind.
You're on the distribution, right? You get the.
Right, the
invitation.
PCA, yeah. Okay. So maybe I'll send over some materials and then we can get a head count of who is gonna be there from PCA.
Yeah, I think Bert sent you a message, so I think just CCing
Everybody,
back, then you'll get
Okay.
Fred and me and Bert,
okay, great.
and we can connect with the rest of the PCA.
And I saw in the minutes about the community climate conversation about the master plan. I don't know.
That'll be in the fall.
I think in the last committee meeting last month, I think we were thinking that that logically could follow whatever we end up doing with the city council, and that maybe some of the content that we prepare for that can then be sort of taking off
Yeah,
point. And I think, as it says in this summary here, connecting it to the master plan, I think
Right.
would be well
And we-
timed.
we do have our representative, Jessica, on the master plan advisory committee, is that right?
Yes, unfortunately, I missed the first meet and greet one, but I filled out the doodle poll to determine the next one, so stay tuned.
Right.
Anything else? Is there any other under community engagement?
I will just offer, so you're all aware, well, a couple of things. So when Effie and I were looking at the agendas, it seemed like the community conversations and community engagement would kind of be parsed out as two separate things. And so we are just thinking that it kind of makes more sense for future, that community engagement include all kinds of things that we're doing within the community, including the conversations and, you know, when we talk about the fair and those kinds of things. So if you've noticed, the agenda looks a little different. We just thought that was more succinct because we usually do wind up talking about all those things at the same time anyway. And to offer another, I learned last week that the farmers market this year, instead of doing just one eco day in August, they are doing eco month throughout all of July at all of the farmers markets. So I will actually be tabling with Karen Barndollar on what day did we say? The 19th, I think. Yep, the 19th of July. But I think if this committee or anybody else is interested in trying to table at one of the farmers markets to talk about sustainability and things, I can tell you who Karen reached out with to make sure we had a spot at the market for that day. So
So who will you and Karen be representing?
Seacoast can.
Oh, okay.
That's how Karen did it. So.
So that's Seacoast Climate Action Network, just, okay.
Yeah.
I'll get the
You don't want to be
acronyms.
talking in
Yeah.
acronyms.
Is it network or now?
Sorry.
Oh,
It's now, you're
Yes.
right, sorry.
not yesterday,
Climate action.
not tomorrow, now.
Yeah.
In July, are you?
The 19th, we will be tabling that Saturday.
Have a tent? Do they make you have a tent? Cause I did the farmer's market for years and, you know, you have to have a tent, you have to have, you know, weights on the
25-pound weights,
45-pound weight.
25.
Oh, I thought they were supposed to, whatever. You know, do you have to have all that? or-
I'm guessing so. Karen is kind of leading this initiative and I just said I would come and support, but I would imagine that seems to be the protocol, so.
So you'll need banners and pamphlets to hand out to people, you know, any signs you want to make up for the table. It's fun though, a lot of nice people. Go to the farmer's market.
Mhm.
If you need any postcards, I got a bunch.
Sure, if there's anything that anybody wants to put out on the table, sure we'll be looking for items and things to
Can you
share.
do it
from-
every, would you be allowed to do it every week if you wanted to?
Yes,
If you could get the volunteers to, okay,
Yes.
and they're not charging you anything for that? I mean, we always had to pay, but we were vendors, so.
again, I'm not sure. I don't
Okay.
think so, but Karen took the lead and just asked if I could table with her and I said yes, and that's the date we chose, so. I'm
That's good.
following her lead,
8 to noon, right?
yes.
Okay, do we have anything else on the other? Okay, we'll move on to the cap spreadsheet. I think we all have, that was sent to us.
Great, thanks, Nancy. I just wanted to talk about the idea of having a spreadsheet that we bring out at meetings. Fred and I had a conversation about, could we have this online somewhere so people could go in and look at it rather than having it go out once a month with the agenda? And that would be great. The other thing I worry about is I don't think everybody has Word. So I don't know when you get this file, if it looks all wonky and weird with columns all over the place. I haven't heard that. I know it from past experience. But I'm curious the best way to do this. And as we go through the sheet, I'm wondering if people want to take their piece of it and then just be in touch with me as they're working. I realize that we are all volunteers. So I was talking with one committee member and I said, it doesn't have to be for this capital improvement plan. There's another one next year and the year after that. And we're really eager to see a lot of things in the climate action plan happen. But I understand people have jobs and families and lots of responsibilities. So if people are worried when they see their name on the sheet in the first column, I just want to give that perspective.
I like the idea of having it be a living document and
Yeah.
not put such a burden on you to be constantly cutting and pasting, because if it really is a living document, there's new things happening, hopefully,
Yeah.
all the time for implementing. Things are scheduled, votes are taken, preliminary meetings are held for the CIP. So I don't know, are folks able to use Word without issues? And I don't know then what the sensitivity is about having a living document. I mean, it could be as simple as a shared file. Is that something we can do as a committee, or does it have to go formally through the city and then
Yeah,
you gotta
Kate,
have
tell us
lawyers and
about
all
that.
that? Does that
Definitely
kill it?
can't.
But what I was picturing was breaking the document up and giving it people their parts, their rows.
Makes sense.
Okay, what about the shared documents? How does that work?
We've in the past considered it a quorum, so we like Google Drive and things like that, so it probably would be a lot easier just to parse it out into different sections. Cause we can't all put on one document at once.
But then that makes it somewhat static in that it probably only gets updated once a month when you can put
Right.
together all the different pieces and remind people to do it. That sounds like a lot of work.
I don't mind that, but I'm just not sure of the most effective way, given that we can't have Google Docs where everybody can go in and say, oh, we did this and we're not gonna do this, and we talked to so and so.
Add comments and notes
Yeah.
to someone else, like, this
Yeah.
looks like your topic, you do it.
Yeah, I mean, if you added your parts of it, Bill,
Yeah.
you don't have to be reintegrated with somebody else's parts. It's just as long as your parts are current.
Yeah.
You can update it as much often as you want.
But if I wanted to update it, let's say this hasn't really changed for 2 months, really, or so, and if I needed to update something, how would you know what I've just updated?
Why would you need to know?
Like traction.
Yeah, I mean, people
Because you're
could
combining-
email me.
You don't have to combine, that's the thing. If you're gonna present it to somebody, we can, you can present your section, I can present my section.
Yeah, but I'd like everyone to have the benefit of
Well,
seeing
yeah,
the
yeah,
most
so we
current
can-
version.
We can redistribute it every month with the minutes
Yeah.
we've been doing.
And Kate, could you open the PowerPoint to, I think it's slide 6.
Is the quorum issue only if everyone has editable access.
Yeah, so if there's the potential for them all to be in the Google Drive room. Or
'Cause-
like in the chat box, if there's.
Cause I think the benefit is for everyone to be able to, in real time, see the updates.
Right.
So we could have a document or an Excel or a Google Sheet or whatever form that's owned and updated by one person. You know, and so Bill can email Effie and say, this is the update for
Mhm.
this section, but could be viewed by everyone at any given time,
Yeah, that's a good point.
That makes sense.
right?
Yeah,
So,
Cause the quorum issue is that we're all in the document actively having discussion or
Chatting.
whatever it might be.
mhm.
Yeah,
So maybe that's a way to at least make it so that we can still get the benefit of seeing like the updated progress. You know, barring that Effie.
No, no.
So like, just do that, 'cause then
Looking
that's
for a solution from the group, so that's
yeah,
perfect.
and then at least it's viewable.
Yeah, I want everybody to go in and see, oh, yeah, you know, they might see something, heaven forbid, in the Portsmouth Herald and think, oh, yeah, we're working on that. And they might go to the spreadsheet and find out where we're at with
And
it.
then every meeting, we just include that most updated version of the spreadsheet in the minutes so that
That was
it's
it, rolls,
public.
that one. So the other thing I've done with the spreadsheet, in the row that goes across several columns for each action, Jess and I met and we talked about the kind of roles that we talked about earlier this year, what this committee could do, looking at the ordinance and knowing the limits of what we do. There are lots of things we can do with the climate action plan. And we talked about where we want to be next March so that we can look back and say, okay, we've done this, this, and this. Or in August, I'm sorry, when we meet with the city council, we'll be able to say, this is what we're working on, this is what we advise. So these are the roles we had talked about before. Research, looking what other cities have done. Previous to going to capital improvement plan, you know, getting cost estimates and thinking about all the elements involved in a proposal for the capital improvement plan. General recommendations to city council, advocating and supporting efforts in progress, maybe by city staff, zoning amendments, getting involved with the master plan, outreach to the community. I know Colleen was interested in this, and working with the planning department using Bright Action. So these are all ways we can work on the plan. And when Jess and I went through looking at the actions that we've chosen so far, I'd like to go through them quickly in this meeting. It's not like I expect momentous work every month, but just to update what's happening. I know that Bill had done a lot of work on the transportation section, but I think we're up to date on those three actions. Is that right? So you can read about that in the spreadsheet, and that's great if that's happening. And then, Fred, I'm looking at the top of page 3, create EV charging plan and accelerate installations. And
I filled out that section today.
I'm sorry,
I filled out that row today.
oh, you did, okay.
Time to cut and
It's,
paste.
it's not, it's,
Where did you,
it's on my, I sent it to Kate.
okay, good. Okay, so did you see what I put there?
No,
Okay, so I'm sorry, but 2 spreadsheets went out. The one from Bill that I didn't fill in, I took Bill's and added it to the master spreadsheet. So if you looked at that one, you didn't see. I had added,
Kate had both of them, I think, in the,
oh, yeah, they did.
I looked at both of them, so I'm not,
Okay, so I had added research, how would it work for e-bike charging, need.
Yeah, I saw that, yeah,
charges,
yeah.
all that. So I'll look at what you wrote and we don't, is there anything we need to talk about here as a group?
and I have a update from DPW on the status of the EV charging, if you'd like. And it's also speaks to Jones Ave. Instead of trying to summarizing it, we can either play it now, because that 4.5 hour long meeting, Peter Rice presented on both of them.
Mhm.
So I sent Kate the link to the YouTube so we could just watch.
Yeah,
Peter, if you'd like, describe what's going on with both Jones Ave, where it is
Jones Ave and the EV
together.
charging. Maybe we'll do that at the end after we go through the
That's fair.
spreadsheet, but when we come to something that's related to
Related.
that.
Sounds
Okay,
Great.
you want EV charging at the state level?
The EV charging at the city level, because several years ago, I was able to put in the capital improvement plan, I think it's $150,000 a year for level 2 and level 3 chargers throughout the city. And although the level 2 chargers at the Bridge Street lot have gone in, there hasn't been much more progress to my knowledge. So I'd asked for a report back if there is a plan to see if for this upcoming capital improvement plan, there should be a push essentially for a study to be done. It's like, where can these actually be installed? So the first step was asking the city manager for a report back what the current status is. And we got that report back, the current status, along with the Jones Ave solar array report back at the same time. So.
Great, and the next one was electrification of the city fleet, which we have your name next to. So I don't know if that's related to this.
It's not related to.
Oh, no, it's not,
I've been
okay.
focusing on those.
So you had proposed it for the capital improvement plan to do a plan for city fleet electrification.
Correct, that
and it
that was voted down.
Yeah.
This past time.
So I was wondering, and this is just whether to do it again with, you know, a cost benefit thing, and to point out that the city now has a goal of net zero emissions for 2040. I don't know.
I did make those arguments
You did
last
already.
time.
I'm
that
sure you.
that we did indeed have a net zero energy goal that was 2040 adopted in the climate action plan.
Okay.
Still no progress. So I think, I don't know if it would make sense to ask in this upcoming CIP for the city council to try to both electrify the fleet and separately do the EV charging for public infrastructure, or just focus on one over the other.
Right.
So,
Okay, that's a great
Electrifying the
question.
Fleet is the proposal to do that as vehicles get to
The
their end of
proposal
life
was-
kind of deal, and so it's,
So
if you're gonna buy new fleet vehicles, then they,
not even
Am I
that
correct?
far. So there's a rolling stock program where you can see where all the vehicles are, and they're being phased out at the end of their life, and they're being auctioned off. What my proposal was for was just to spend, I don't know if it was 60,000 or 90,000, I don't know what the amount was, for the city to put out a request for proposals for a study to be done on how to go about replacing the fleet, opposed to onesie, okay, this car, that car, say, all right, first let's focus on these vehicles, then, all right, the police department, apparently, police officers are really enjoying electric vehicles, as police cars, so just to go through all the different vehicles, including school buses at some point, and it's like, hey, here's an actual plan to, versus just looking at the rolling stock list and saying, hey, could this be an electric vehicle? And saying, no, here's an actual plan done by a professional. So that's what I pushed for at the last CIP, and maybe had one vote in support, so.
But that's a great question, whether to combine it with looking at the charging citywide. You know, the RFP could cover both.
Cover both, or just would focusing just on one makes sense, so.
Yeah. Right. Great.
I feel like whoever's fulfilling that is gonna be looking at very common things,
Mhm.
right? Like if they're looking at where they can put chargers that are municipality
Yeah,
lots. And then they're also looking at which, you know, whether it's police department or which departments or which owners and where these vehicles are living most of the time. They're gonna be looking at where they're charging in municipal lots. So there's part of me that feels like they're gonna be doing the same research, and so in that way, from a technical standpoint, I think it would make sense to combine them. With that said, there might be reasons as to not combine them from a non-technical standpoint of it getting done or adoption or perception of, you know,
Confusing people.
yeah.
Yeah.
Public or private chargers.
Yeah, right. Well, we'll have more time to talk about that before the CIP. The next one is about the electrification of the school bus fleet, and I wanted to thank you, Nancy, for all the work you've done.
You're welcome. And I have another, can I pass this out? This is
Sure.
what the Concord School District did. They have some buses coming their way. I apologize for not getting it out to everybody sooner, but they applied for the Clean School Bus Program by the EPA, and they were awarded $1,035,000, which is gonna buy, you know, I looked at this a while ago, is it 3 buses, which they hope to go into the fleet in September. So, and it included the charging stations, I believe. I looked at this a long time ago now, so everybody read it for a minute, but,
And do they own their buses? Do they own it? Or do they rent?
I believe they own their buses, which we do not in Portsmouth.
So also on the agenda later on, we have about having someone from Student Transportation of America, Rachel Lane, that Bill had introduced to the committee, having her come in on Zoom and just educate us generally about electrification of school buses.
When she presented to New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services on the New Hampshire climate plan, her examples were all New Hampshire examples, which was, I think, really helpful.
Right.
Just the second one, it says the district runs its own bus fleet using Thomas-built buses.
Those are the diesel buses.
That's who manufactures them, or they do what we do?
I don't know.
Thomas is the manufacturer.
Is that a
So,
manufacturer?
okay.
Okay, I don't know.
Just,
And are the EPA funds available any longer?
I don't know.
Highly.
It's not.
I would think not, but
Or in.
Yeah.
Probably not. They might
it's good.
reopen at some point, so
Yeah.
I don't think it's something to write off.
right.
There's a lot of just stalled things that in hope, you know,
But it's great to have these numbers, Nancy. Thank you. Yeah.
I called a lot of school districts and they were the only ones that got back to me, so I can keep researching
Yeah,
other school
great.
districts. And it doesn't appear that there are that many in New Hampshire that have electric school buses, but I'll keep searching.
yeah, I imagine that one of the limiting factors that you don't have to fight as much is distance. I mean, in so many of the regional school districts in New Hampshire. It's like
Travel.
an hour and a
Yeah,
half bus
yeah.
ride for some of those kids. And we, you know, have the luxury of, similar to Concord, generally short distances.
So the next thing Fred and I worked on was adoption of new zoning to allow private solar arrays. And this has been a action that Fred and I have been working on for a couple of years, and other people have been involved longer than that. And in the meantime, the city planning department had recommendations from SolSmart. So we had a really productive meeting with Jillian Harris, who's in charge of looking at the SolSmart recommendations and our zoning and trying to write all the amendments to go to the planning board, and Peter Stith, who's a planner in the planning department. Fred and I met with them a couple of weeks ago, and we went through.
Kate Cook.
Oh, yeah, and Kate Cook came, it was great. So we went through all the SolSmart recommendations, and there were some changes made to the amendments and some additions that have been made in the meantime that answered some of my concerns. And in addition, Counselor Cook was very tuned to incentives and how do we incentivize solar arrays. So there was quite a discussion about that, though I don't know what the answer is. But that's moving along. And I think, you know, our role changes as the planning board comes up, the planning department presents these amendments to the planning board, who will then recommend them to the city council. I think we can play a role of supporting and advocating for these changes, having worked with the department and seeing what Soul Smart presented. So that's a positive, and we can talk about that one. Any questions about that?
Said the city does have incentives for solar arrays, those that aren't aware, but you have to own your house and own the solar array. And you can have the value of the solar array deducted from your taxes. If that makes sense.
So that's great, but we were thinking also of like Walmart, you know, what's an incentive for them to cover their parking lot with solar arrays, or a lot of other rooftops, a lot of flat rooftops in Portsmouth. So that's progress. And then I thought for the building solar arrays with capacity to power municipal buildings, so it's RE6. It's
There to go back.
no, it's gotta be up.
You were on it just now.
I can't actually see.
But I was thinking, this is something the planning department could take on, right?
Go back.
Keep going, keep going.
There you go, thanks.
One more. Look right there.
There at the bottom of the
Bottom.
page. And I said, look at the April 21st city council meeting where Peter Rice described potential city efforts in solar and wind, which is, I think, what we're gonna be watching. Josh, is that right?
What's the date then?
April 21st?
No, this is a new update.
Okay, new update. And then what about city parking lots, for example, Portsmouth High School, rooftops, advocacy and support where needed, tied to city council goal of net zero emissions by 2040. So this is on the next page, Kate, I'm sorry, it spans 2 pages. Oh, yeah. So I don't know, I mean, I can't assign this to the planning department, but it seems like you all would be pursuing RE6.
I think actively already, yeah, we are, myself, and also Peter are also working on a couple other of the CAP strategies this year, so hopefully that is one of the things that we work on pretty actively, so.
So is that something that you could report on to this committee?
Even just to say that you're working on it would be a nice, useful addition.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What and what?
I guess I gotta read it better. My glasses, but yeah.
And I'm going to remove this one, which I love, but nobody's picked up. Further community-wide building weatherization. We, at the beginning of the year, each said what we were really interested in and motivated to work on. And that's how we came up with this list from the CAP. But this one, nobody picked up, so I'm gonna take it off the list. Unless someone jumps in.
I was feeling that eye contact.
Or you
Um,
might find another one in the BE section,
Yeah.
obviously.
I think that it's an important one on the education side. It's a really hard one because you're talking about private property and a
Yeah.
lot of there is a lot of low hanging fruit with weather stripping and those types of things. When you start getting into windows and you start getting into insulation, it very quickly becomes a lot of effort.
Yeah.
And people get understandably frustrated because then they run into code and they run into permits to do things and they run into the cost.
And questionable availability of
Yeah,
federal rebates.
well, I was about to say, the rebate side, it's a lot harder than like the mechanical side, whether it's New Hampshire saves or it's even
Yeah.
the federal tax credits. What is available is a lot less, and then quite honestly, building materials and being able to get someone to even come do some of these things. The
Yeah.
lead times on
There-
Windows
there
3
is a-
alone are, and
There is
so
a
I think
non-
that there's other things that probably, as far as like effort goes, probably might go a little further, but I think it's, you know, I'm happy that it's in the cap, and I think it's still a really
Yeah.
worthwhile. I think that would be a good example of something to go into personal actions on Bright Action,
Mhm.
right? Cause it's really that education component and telling people how much these savings they could find, that I think is the,
Workshops, we've had
Yeah.
a couple of them.
yeah, or facilitating things that are like easy from there, but I think Bright Action is probably the best place for.
I've seen, there's a nonprofit called Window Dressers, and they make insets that go in windows and improve the insulation of houses by a lot. And York has a window dressers program and Exeter has one. We don't have one in Portsmouth. So if you run into anyone who's looking to start a nonprofit, this is a program that's up and running a lot of places. Would be great if someone did that, but we don't have that yet.
We talked about that at the Seacoast Can board.
Oh, yeah,
Certainly of launching that locally. Using using people from York to kind of help us get started.
right, right.
I mean, we haven't committed to it, but it's.
Yeah,
we're-
but you're aware of it and looking at it, great. So Josh, I hate to ask, because I feel like I should know the latest about the Stormwater Enterprise Fund. And I
It's,
can't remember if you got a report back or not.
yeah, it was a verbal report back. What it comes down to is it's still being litigated in
Okay,
the courts.
so,
Is that a fair summary?
so Dover has one or no?
They failed.
Dover pursued one.
Okay,
It hasn't been successful yet.
okay. So I can't say that. Thank you. So I don't know if we should take this one off or or just keep it and just wait. Is it state litigation?
Yeah, it's gonna
Yeah,
be,
okay.
it's essentially challenging the law,
Okay,
whether or not it can be done.
okay.
So I think it's worthwhile keeping on the long
Okay.
run. Maybe not have it this year, because I know it's something
Mhm.
that other members of the city council are interested in. And there's nothing that really can be done at this moment.
But that way we'll keep it on the list, so we're tracking it. Maxon isn't here, and he was very interested in reducing water loss. But I couldn't find anything like that in the plan. So, Maxon, if you're listening to this, could you look through the plan, particularly the section about adaptation and resilience, and see if you see a good match?
So every sustainability topic doesn't have to fit into the cap or this exercise. It's just that's what we're doing here, and
right,
Maxon may be
Right, that's
interested in
absolutely, yes, thank you for
water
saying that.
related as a sustainability topic, but
Right.
right now our focus is on that.
Right, and I think the library might have one of those meters that identifies
It's
water
we built
leaks.
To some of the green building side of the cap.
Yeah,
Just more generally. So that's one area where I think that could fit in,
Right.
definitely.
So creation of a zero waste plan.
So that is a work in progress. As Effie mentioned, I'm not sure that we will be ready for this year's CIP, because Rayanne and I are really just trying to get started on the research and learn what other communities are doing. I know she recently met with Dave Denzio, I think, or Denzio, who is the chair of Dover's Solid Waste Advisory Committee, to kind of find out more about what Dover is doing to manage waste. So that is a work in progress, and that's sort of our long-term goal, is to envision it being a proposal, and that they consider, doing an RFP to get a consultant to develop a zero waste plan for us. And that being said, I think a lot of these pieces sort of fall under that, and like, for me, I just kind of casually keep following what's happening, like where's the city with the free cycle at the city yard? My understanding is a lot of that stuff won't happen until we get a new transfer station, but the transfer station kind of keeps getting kicked down the road due to other budgetary priorities, so some of this stuff is just kind of yeah, a little bit of just keeping your ears open about what's going on. And so to the second piece of promotion of household and restaurant activities, I met with Kristen and Kim and kind of talked about what they're doing to work on Skip the Stuff and how we can support them with that. I'm still hoping to talk to Josh because I know he's done a lot of these things already and get a better picture of challenges and hurdles that he had and how we might approach them differently. That said, July is plastic free month, so that is one of the reasons that I will be at the farmer's market next month advocating for that. Karen is a big advocate of composting. That's been her longtime mission, so I'm sure that we'll be talking about that as well. So we are trying to take action to work on some of those things a little bit and raise community awareness and sort of, again, map out, I think, where we're gonna focus our efforts and what makes the most sense.
And again, this one ties to Bright Action, I think,
Mhm.
so we'll have to. So for me, there's the addition of energy criteria and reduction of greenhouse gases to the capital and operating budget criteria. And I happened to run into poor Peter Rice, just because he ran into it. I asked him about this and he seemed to think there was something done already, but I looked and I didn't see that it was changed. But he said I should meet with Peter Britz.
You mean
So-
the CIP criteria?
Yeah, well, I would start with the capital rather than, I don't know the operating budget.
There is a criterion, I remember, for relationship to other city plans, so that would include.
Right,
the
that's
cap-
been there for a
cap
long time.
As a greenhouse gas reduction, but
Yeah,
I think that we've been thinking about that, it's make it an explicit criterion
right.
when relevant. I mean, it's not gonna be relevant to everything, but it would be relevant for many of the things up right there.
There is a sustainability criteria that was added last year, but I think we pushed.
Well, I went online and I didn't see it. Maybe if you could
It's in-
send me the link, maybe I was looking at something old.
It
It
might
might
be,
regarding like
this is
green energy recs, like energy procurement, or
This
is
is what the
this?
finance department goes through when they look at all the capital improvement projects and they go in and score them.
Wait,
Oh, I was looking at the front end for people to submit
yeah,
proposals for the capital
and that
plan, and that hadn't changed.
for sustainability, it would unavoidably have to be somewhat narrative rather than here's a greenhouse gas million metric tons payoff relative to the targets and the cap.
So I'll be following up on that, probably talking to Peter.
So this is adding a category. Be able to propose?
The way it is, the form used to have the criteria listed and then you would refer to the criteria in your request. And you could say like it links to the climate action plan, because it says links to other city plans or the
Yeah.
bike pedestrian plan, whatever.
This would be much more specific for some
Yes.
projects.
Yeah, and-
Like widening the road.
Right.
be Possibly negative and putting in a bike path if
Right.
there was an estimate of trips reduced and additional bike trips substituting for car trips, that should get some points because it actually moves forward to implement and advance on the target.
Right, and something I don't know is whether the departments have the same criteria that we as public outsiders applying have. So I'll have to talk to Peter about that and see, but if you're in, like, most of the CIP requests come from DPW. So it might have to be something that's phased in over time. You know, you can't add the criteria and expect all the staff to change overnight and have all this additional information.
Well,
So,
if you're thinking about like greenhouse gas emissions as a criteria, it probably will have to be phased in over time because there's so much more research that you have to do now. On top of that, with extra staff time and hours and learning how to research
Right.
that.
right,
Because it would often take some modeling and forecasting, but the
Yeah.
consultant,
Uh,
Vanessa Hagen,
Consultants.
did that in developing.
I
So
would
it might-
almost argue, like, there's two directions you can go, right? You can go from the high level, which is what most of the things of the CIP are, right? It's like,
Yeah.
we're gonna repay, it's not how or how much or, they're pretty broad. And so, yes, I think ensuring that there's an awareness of sustainability, which now it is in there, it is like, starting to be recognized as important. I just don't know how much a general emissions number at that level is really gonna drive change. Like, for example, if we look at municipal buildings, right? We could have them estimate how much emissions come from a remodel of something, but the more impactful way is like the policy that says if you are redoing windows, then they need to be to this standard.
mhm.
And then DPW just knows that in that project and in that budget, they need to meet those specifications.
Mm.
And to me, that feels
Yeah.
probably more impactful at the end of the day than having them do a calculation of a number that doesn't really have.
Yeah,
Well,
I
I'm
think,
reading it.
I think that
Yeah.
point is fair, because a lot of the specific DPW, say, transportation projects are for this block, put in another lane or another sidewalk.
Mhm.
But to be able to describe the project in terms of bigger picture, is it plus, is it minus, what is the general range of
Yeah.
implications, I think would add, I think, some specificity that's relevant for supporting the cap without having to actually say, for this particular project, downtown 2 blocks, we're trying to decide whether to add a lane or to widen the sidewalk. I mean, just to put that on
And
the
I-
table.
Could you just
I
tie
think with
the actual
doing a
cap?
phase in for these kind of criteria that like in early days, departments might be able to have a narrative response that would say, presumably this will lower greenhouse gases by this and this, not with numbers, but by this method and this method. We are not able to quantify this at this time, something like that.
It's
And
a known
the-
best practice.
What's that?
It's a known best practice.
Well,
When you do this, it generally.
when I talked to Peter Britz about this, he suggested I look at the city of Cambridge, so I haven't done that. So that's research on my end. But I think there are improvements we could make, even a phased in approach with that.
What about having the option to tie efforts to elements of the cap? I feel like that
That would
is,
be, yeah.
like
yeah.
this falls under
Mhm.
improving buildings, or this falls under improving bicycle transportation, or whatever it is, and one that, because the cap is prioritized by things that make an impact, so inherently things that tie to the cap should
Yeah.
naturally be in the right direction.
Mhm.
And then on the other side, it makes the cap continuously relevant. And then when those projects go out to RFP, that being in there naturally signals that therefore this project is to meet this goal in a way that I think.
Yeah, and that's how the criteria are now in a way, because it says how this proposal relates to existing city plans, but tying it to something specific in the cap would
As-
take it one step further.
As applicable to the project, and it's gonna really depend. I mean, some things
Yeah.
will be way too detailed to think
Yeah.
about that, but let's say maybe in a few minutes, we're gonna talk about free parking. I mean, there would be a distinction between the cap greenhouse gas implications of free parking versus the cap implications of doing the top 3 priorities in the new bike pit plan. But to have that as part of the conversation, even if it's more qualitative than quantitative, I think would be progress. And I think, Effie, you have that as not just the CIP, but also the operating budget.
Right.
I think just bringing that into the discussion is a contribution from this committee and highlighting and raising the prominence of the cap.
Yeah.
I'm thinking even if we could go broader and just advocate for adding in a box that you have to, or a sentence where you have to describe how this project helps meet net zero by 2035 for the municipality.
Hmm.
Net
Yeah.
zero.
And implementation
Mhm.
of the cap as specifically as you're able to, which is
Yeah.
not absolute requirement. It's as, the
Well, that
more,
would be the
the clearer you
easiest
can
way.
be, the stronger your case.
Yeah, if we do a narrative that's, how does this help meet that city goal? And then
Mhm.
the easiest way is, well, the cap is to meet that goal. So if I can just find something in the cap that relates, then I put that in and
I have solar panels on my building, so therefore.
And there may be CIP proposals that are negative,
Mhm.
and that should be part of the discussion.
Yeah. So I'm gonna research that and I'll report back to y'all.
That would be a good one for best practices if there are some examples.
Right, I hope to find some.
I can give you the contact to the woman in Albany, California, because that's
good.
one of the things
yeah.
that they did.
Oh, good.
I don't know if it
Yeah.
was proposals or all city reports, but there was a line that they had to fill in
Oh,
in
yeah.
relation to their cap. I've always
Right.
thought that we
Right.
should kind of,
Thanks.
yeah.
And then I'm looking at recommendations about greenhouse gas inventories and how frequently other cities and towns are updating them. There's a real range, so I want to see what national organizations are recommending and what other cities and towns consider best practices, but I don't have the answer yet. And then Bert, you had talked about maintaining the committee's focus on results and systems. I'm not sure how to tie that to the climate action plan, or if there's something else in the plan you want to pick. I don't want to limit you.
I was just I put two things in and I realized what's happened for me is I'm sitting here and I'm looking at the screen. I'm looking at this and where I'm coming from in the beginning of the committee. I was working kind of on high level systems thinking, education, and involvement. And what I see is happening is your life experience is very much meshing with the spreadsheet, activities, and agenda, which is a world that is not where my time, energy, and passion is at this time.
Uh-huh.
As I was just on an international call and I was using Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson's Venn diagram.
Yeah.
And if we're going to work in sustainability for the long time,
Uh-huh.
what do we know about? I know about a lot about education,
Mhm.
what needs being done. Well, we need to do a lot in a short period of time, and we need to get to be scaling.
Mhm.
And so I'm now thinking, just personally today, I was talking about the UN conference in Brazil in September and how we have connections and we have 3 continents on our call coming up on Monday. People are talking on that scale.
Wow.
Well, I feel like I'm a fish out of water because I've never walked in this international scale, but it's coming up.
Mhm.
And then I'm getting here and I was thinking, where do I fit in? And so what I'm saying now, you can take that off if you would like. And I'm thinking what my contribution might be as time goes on to maybe bring to this committee, for example. I didn't know about it, but how many of you ever follow the UN conferences on the environment. How many of you actually get put a significant amount of time other than getting the report on the evening news that you research? Okay.
Newsletters. is-
Yeah, I haven't, to be honest with you.
Oh.
I get the big stuff.
Yeah.
This year, for the first time, they've given a budget to a app called Multiverse. And they are designing an avatar that each of us in this room, our junior high school kids, our high school kids, anybody around the world can actually go to the UN conference in real time. And they've been hired to create the meeting hall that is actually going to be in place if you go to Brazil. So if we go there, we would show as avatars inside the meeting hall. And we could go live, say Al Gore is doing something over here or somebody else. And we could all talk to each other. We could go as a group, we can talk to each other.
Yeah.
And then they're going to take us up to another spot where they're going to take people on a tour of the Amazon. And the indigenous people whom we have contact with are saying they would take us and actually take us on a tour.
Hmm.
And so I'm thinking, in education,
Hmm.
that's so far over my head that we're going to spend the next month or two learning it. Maybe I could share a little bit of that here,
Right,
and then we could bring something of that down.
right.
But I'm not sure where I fit in these days, but that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking about.
That sounds great.
And
Yeah.
this Monday, the 7th, we have 3 different continents
Wow.
coming together to talk about it, and I don't know what's gonna happen.
So here we are focusing on the climate action plan for our little city in the world. And here you're gonna bring us back out and say, this is what's going on.
And I
Globally.
tell people what we're doing here because all sustainability takes place in a sense of place.
Yeah,
So I'm gonna realize that what this group is so, I don't think you could hire people to do what, this is real work, what people are doing
yeah,
in this. So anyway,
yeah.
I
yeah.
hope that I can make a contribution. I don't know if I
Yeah.
can.
So that might be in July then, or if there are events in between the meetings, if you send them to Kate, I think she would send them out to the group.
Like, how many, I'm just curious, how many people would be interested in a 10-minute presentation? There's already a model of how to go to this conference with an avatar. I was overwhelmed with it.
Yeah.
I didn't even know if I wanted to do it,
Yeah.
but now I'm trying to learn.
Yeah.
Oh, I know, here, put your fist out, please. The truth will make you free. Fist out, everybody. I don't want a video game, or I'm kind of interested, or I'd actually like to see a presentation. Notes with 1, the truth. 1, 2, 3. Where are you? All right, 1, 2, see, okay.
I'm in the middle.
So, all right, so so I'll play with it. If it becomes more interesting, I would.
That would be a good contribution, even if it doesn't fit into a box on this. It's just,
Yeah.
Just a
FYI.
Thanks, Bert. I want to move on to the last couple that are listed for Colleen, who's on Zoom.
Hello.
Hi, Colleen. Colleen is sick tonight, and I really wanted Colleen to meet Tori
Hello,
because
Tori.
your interest in green building, Tori's played a big role with the city working on that. So
So,
leave it up to you two to meet.
okay, yeah, Tori, I will find your email on the like group emails that were sent out and we can talk about it. I owe or I self-assigned myself, some more stuff for the like community engagement outreach side, and it's in progress. I owe it to you guys, I think, for July. I don't know, again, where the, when it comes to the council presentation, I personally would not rank this as high on the priority list of things to emphasize, other than like hey, throughout this process of trying to achieve these goals, we're going to be engaging the community in XYZ ways, not necessarily being that community engagement itself is the priority. It's like a pillar of these other things that we actually want to achieve. So yeah, I should have details on like that list of groups and pathways for engaging them for the July meeting, and I'm hoping to just put it on the agenda and get feedback from you guys.
Right.
What I do have right now is a list of the current ongoing community engagement that I was hoping I could just read to you all, and then if you don't hear something that you know about mentioned, email it to me or add it to the meeting notes, the minutes, just so that I can make sure to properly document, have an awareness of what's currently ongoing. I know we have Bright Action, the community conversations, the sustainability fair, the port swap, the presentations to the city council, engagement with the middle and high schools, Seacoast Can has skipped the stuff, and similar programs. Is there any other ongoing community engagement or like stakeholder engagement that I should be aware of?
Change in the fair.
Well, I think of Bright Action, but I don't know if you mentioned that, Colleen, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
It-
it
it
was
might-
very fast, but yeah.
It might be useful also to at least be aware of the ones that have been held the last year or two, because those are
Mhm.
useful resources, because if we've covered a topic well, then it's less likely we're going to do it right away. But some of those have pretty good documentation, and those are up, I guess, mostly on the Portsmouth Climate Action website.
Okay, great. I will take a look at that list.
Colleen,
That's
the other,
helpful.
the other
Yep.
thing I think of is, in the PowerPoint, we had a list of potential partners. And I think you helped brainstorm that list, because I remember adding to the list after our meeting. Thanks, Kate. Kate just called it up.
Yeah,
So like some of these, like I think of, oh, they're not even there, the Rockingham County Planning Commission.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'm like gonna be starting with this list. I'd really like to put it on like a proper stakeholder map and, see power and influence and all these different things. And have like start filling out like a contact management spreadsheet type thing to say like, okay, how often do we want to be reaching out to these groups? Who's the liaison? What are the prior or topics of interest or priorities? How does that overlap with the CAP? Like really start to drill down, or at least to Bert's points earlier, like create the systems that will allow us to do this work effectively and consistently. But that is not yet finalized, so I will have it for the July meeting, but right now it is more a hypothetical.
So I wonder if we could use that for the Bright Action meeting somehow.
Hmm.
But Colleen, what you're creating, would you call it an outreach plan or a communications plan or?
I would call them stakeholder engagement mechanisms,
Okay,
because it depends on the stakeholders themselves as to like,
Yeah.
as a committee, are we just advising? Are we educating? Like, it makes sense to educate the public. We don't need to advise the public because they're not a committee, but for the Energy Advisory Committee, maybe there's a closer collaboration happening there, right? So I think that defining the relationship with each stakeholder group is a part of that work.
Right.
I just want to create some of the infrastructure that will allow us to do that, because I don't know the actual specifics behind what each relationship would be. I think the longer term, the more tenured members of the committee will have better information on that.
Right. Well, thanks. I'll look forward to learning more next month.
Awesome.
Any comments on that? I just want to say with this plan, I think the plan is to put it in Google Docs. And then I can edit it if you send me material. And I just want to say, you know, if you need to change something that's in your row, please feel free. This was all provisional and for discussion. So, you know, feel free to call me, email me, whatever.
But then we have to get into track changes or just say, drop in this new piece.
Only if you could change it.
I mean,
Yeah,
we would
that-
have to, if we want to change 10% of it, we would have to send you a track
Oh,
change version.
I was thinking that you would change the row that you're
Yeah,
listed
right,
for.
right.
Yeah, not someone else's row.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if we wanted to change our row, we would send you a track change version or just say, swap this in.
I guess it depends how
Yeah.
significant a change. It's easy to do, swap it in if you want me to cut
So
and paste.
what's your thinking on the timeline for this table relative to an August? If we're putting it
I
on city
think by
council?
August we'll
This
have a-
table looks to me like a really useful working version, and that if we're heading towards something that's a more polished product, it's a polished subset of this.
That's how I look at it, that by August, we might not have that much to report on, to be honest. But considering we started in January and the plan came out last August, I think that's okay. And then we might be hearing from the planning department about more things going on. But you know, I think there's some significant things in here, but you know, we didn't create sliced bread or whatever.
We can decide how to apply a focus or to filter it for whatever the use is. And if the
Right.
use is something to send to the city council, we can decide that, you know, maybe there are 10 things to include and that the
Yeah.
working table may have 30 things.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I don't think many of these things will end up being presented to the city council in August.
I think Josh had said last month that there might be a written version that goes into the packet. It's not, and then a shorter version that's a
However we
presentation.
wanna do it. The presentation, it's usually good to keep as succinct as possible, and then if we could provide something else, put in the packet if they want to read more
Yeah.
about it.
So we should be counting backwards from the city council meeting, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
And with only one meeting before that,
yeah.
we have to keep that in mind.
Do we have a date for the city council? Is it August 6th?
You picked last.
I think we picked.
For that city council, so this is annual update, city council meeting, right? So this is the first one where we've actually had the cap,
Correct.
like formally. I think we had a draft. Some parts of it started, or our proposal last time, but with that said, it might also be good to think about how this can be consistent in years to come. So for example, with some of these actions or with the cap, outline the actions in the cap that have active progress versus don't have active progress versus are being explored, right? And then we have that year after year, and it's also signaling towards that 2040 goal. And we can kind of highlight those, and we might, choose to talk about specific actions that are relevant, but as part of the packet, it's a little bit of an update for the city council on that side of, and we can do that legwork as the recommendation of, hey, just FYI, here's the things that, you know, we're not seeing progress that we maybe need to and that we'll be looking at, but also from the city council perspective, things that it could help to get your support on and or, you know, have more conversation on. And also just because I worry that if it's just every year we're coming with like a new bunch of items.
Story, here's the story.
Yeah, we will lose that common thread of all the work that went into the cap and the agreement behind the net zero goals and like, I think tying back to those common things as much as we can.
Sounds like a CAP report card.
Yeah, kind
Yeah.
of, pretty much. Yeah, it's us coming and saying, we give ourselves
Needs
roughly this as to achieving what we think we're gonna achieve.
It had things like green light, yellow light, red light or something
Seems
like
like the
that.
infrastructure report card that happens, the American Society of Civil Engineers puts together an infrastructure report card for different states and painful, because it's often low. C as average is definitely taken literally, but you know, so maybe not that direct, but a similar approach, I think might be helpful for the conversation.
Yeah, I was looking back through the notes. We had said August 18th for a city council presentation back in March. But then it got confused with the CIP and council meetings and the CIP deadlines. So I'm not sure. We don't have to do an update to the city council. And Tori, you mentioned an annual presentation, but I don't remember this committee doing.
We've done one, yeah, we've done at least, since I've been on, we've done at least
We did
one,
one
I think
about
maybe two.
putting out an RFP for the cap.
We're a new standing committee, and I think
Yeah.
the thinking on that was to report back on what we've been working on, and
Right.
the CIP is, I mean, the cap is the priority, so
Right.
it would be what we're working on, and it would be a sort of in the form of advice to the council relative to the cap without it being necessarily the whole cap.
Mhm.
We're applying our own limited time. I guess a bit concerned if we have one more meeting before August, and all these are great ideas, but they to do it well, takes time, and we're somewhat constrained by the ability.
Yeah, I
to meet.
wonder if we shouldn't just focus on the cap and if we have CIP proposals and put off the presentation to the council apart from that.
So if this is an annual kind of update,
Yeah,
my real question is like, when in the city council schedule in a given year does this type of update have the highest chance of impact?
The reason why we picked August is when the city council has their work session on the CIP.
Right,
And if the best way for this committee
Yeah.
to influence is by getting items in the CIP to make sure they're funded,
right.
be to present in
Okay.
August.
That's what I had thought was how
So-
we had come to that originally,
So
and that
we
those
could-
dates still
it's-
stand. In the
It's
sense
still-
that,
It's not an update from the committee, it's related to the CIP, the August presentation.
I think it's related to the cap and a dotted
Okay.
line from the
Yeah.
cap to the CIP, because last year we had to get special
Right,
dispensation for Josh and Kate
Right.
Cook to add past the deadline, some sustainability committee projects, but this would be a way of doing this earlier and in a more formal way.
yeah, I see it as like, first half of it is, here's what's going on and here's how we think we're doing, and then the second half of it is and here's the opportunity for improvement, which goes directly into the CIP.
It's also a chance to do some branding of what we do and what we're working on, because we're a new committee. And it's a chance to sort of put some markers down on how we think we're going to be able to help.
I think that's a tall order for August.
Yeah, I
That's
didn't-
my hesitation. I think it's a great idea. I'm not opposed to it, but
I just like building on what Tori was saying. And I was thinking where systems comes in. And it starts to make me reflect, Josh. From your perspective, and I haven't had enough of the meeting. How present is sustainability as an issue on the council? How much time and visibility does it get, would you say?
The most, it's now getting the most it's gotten in my past 10 years of being involved. It's still not that much. Like people are talking about it, but it's not being reflected in votes, whether it be in the CIP or in the budget. And that's the only thing that really matters.
And so what I'm thinking is even if it's a short 5-minute, here's the committee. Where maybe show a picture of us, let them know who we are. That sustainability, we reviewed that we got the cap, that reviewed that we have these things, and just let them know what and make visibility. So for 3 or 4 minutes, it's now sustainability just gets up there.
Mhm.
And I don't know if we have to dig down to the bigger level. And I think that could be done as a possibility, you and Jess or the group or would that be helpful from your perspective?
I think most people, most of the counselors know what the committee now does, because this is the council that voted to make it a standing committee.
Okay,
So maybe a minute or so, but I think just diving straight into, you set these cap goals. Here's our recommendations to you per the ordinance that you passed us.
Here are the cap goals. Here are some priorities, strategies, and here's something within the committee on moving forward.
and there's where I get into systems, leverage, and scaling of all these ones we're doing. Do we have any information or idea? Which one, if we could only have 3, which would be the most scalable and say, here's 3 of them. 1 is easy, 2 is good, 3 is terrible different, but be most important, and just give a little framework.
In some ways, that was what the consultant did in the cap with their prioritization and their high and medium and low impact. And somehow there needs to be a bridge from that to what we want to say to the council on what the committee is advising, where to put the
so
efforts.
it's just, I'm looking at the clock and we still have a video to watch and a couple of agenda items.
Parking.
So I suggest that Jess and I meet and have something for you in July so we can move this along. But what I understand from hearing from the committee is that we're really going to focus on, you know, here's the cap and here's what we advise, these priorities to go in the capital plan for these reasons. And a couple of them came up tonight, so it's not going to be huge.
These priorities, and this is what we're thinking about how the
That's what we
committee can
recommend.
support moving
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
But keep it focused, really sharply focused.
Just, you know, put the video on as a quick intermission, I guess, between this. So, yeah, as a disclaimer, we're all up there going off of, this is 4.5 hours into 5+ hours of meetings.
Little loopy.
Video.
Counselor Tabor.
Wanna actually.
Thank you, Mayor. Energy Advisory Committee met with Peter Rice in May. And we talked about the initial feasibility analysis. Solar array at Jones Avenue. And it was very encouraging, a potential capacity of 1.7 megawatts. Landfill that's fenced off and that and gets no public use at all. The next step would be an RFP to solar developers. And we talked to Peter Rice and city manager. They recommend getting some consulting help to refine the criteria. So we really guide the developers to the best options for the whole city. That process would also include a study of how and where to bring power into the grid, called an interconnect study. So we concluded from our May discussion when we met in June that the project would need some FY 26 funds in the budget. And we voted to, quote, recommend that the city council direct staff to identify funding for and obtain services of a consulting firm for a solar arrays at Jones Avenue landfill. And then also as part of those discussions, I would move that I would ask that we get the report back on the charging stations, because that funding could potentially be changed in use. So if that's okay with everybody.
We would segue into my second info item of the evening, which could further this.
Okay, well, there's no, is there a request on here at the moment, or is this funding for further due diligence?
Yes, there's a request from the committee.
Okay, all right, so city manager, wanna take up your number 2?
I would if I can indulge the council, Peter's got a quick recommendation that helps to further this one.
Good evening. This includes a report back relative to the EV charging stations that we've been installing throughout the city. Our philosophy relative to the charging stations has been one to kind of follow the goal of having folks come and instead of spending 15-20 minutes with a tier 3 charging station or tier 1, whichever it's a little late in the evening. But to go with the middle of the road, the multiple like 2-hour type charging station to promote people coming, staying, walking around, spending money at the stores and enjoying the city. So we've successfully installed a number of charging stations in the area, most recently the Bridge Street lot. And we track the utilization and it's pretty consistent that we're below 25% utilization throughout the day. And that's the hours from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. because that's our time period where we do parking enforcement. So that's where we would be, regulating people at those stations. So it doesn't, based on a utilization standpoint, we're not seeing the huge demand at this time for additional charging stations in the downtown area and the areas that we were thinking would be most appropriate. We are encouraged that tier 1 station or 4 tier 1 stations have been approved at the Port Inn on the bypass, which is a great location for high-speed charging stations. So we're encouraged to see the utilization of that, and that may contribute to some ideas on the outskirts of the city. But we do have about $105,000 in that account or that fund, and I would think that's appropriate use of monies to move the solar project along in lieu of pursuing the charging stations at this time.
Thanks, Peter.
Okay, so
Councilor, is that a question of Peter
Yeah,
Rice?
just thank you for the report back. Obviously, I would support the use of these funds towards solar to be put to use at Jones Ave. My hope had been that since this funding had been identified in the CIP, that go towards a study beyond Bridge Street, 'cause that's been in the work for over 7+ years. And at some point, I would love to see, just if it's possible, do a fast charger at, let's say, the library. Either here or now, I think it's a good use of the funding.
Councilor Taylor, thank you, Councilor Denton.
Yep, and there are, if you look at the element sheet for the CIP, there are 4 future years in addition to this year. Funding for the charging. So I would put a motion before the council to allocate $105,000 of CIP money from the EV charging station element B1-20-PW-47 to obtain consulting services to develop an RFP for the solar array project at Jones Avenue Planning.
Second.
Any further discussion, Councilor Bagley?
We need $135,000 to develop an RFP. We understand the part of that is to achieve information through the interconnect study, which we ballparked at about $80,000.
Correct.
So of that 105, 80,000 would go toward the interconnect study that would help further inform the RFP process and which offers opportunities and method of ownership at the end would make most.
Yeah, the interconnect study is required by Eversource to make sure there's capacity in the circuit, the big transmission circuits within the town. And then about 25 balance would be for the consulting services. And that would be carrying us through the selection of a supply, the build out company, as well as, you know, engineering support throughout that process. So that's what we're envisioning.
Hoping that was
Yeah. Great.
more helpful than me. Trying to regurgitate.
Yeah, and I was interested to hear John Tabor say that the money is in future years.
Correct, it's been
Yeah.
continually in future years.
Yeah.
So
So we won't ask for more.
it's already.
It's already there.
Correct.
A question, so you're talking about city spending money on charging stations. Are they footing the whole bill, or are they going to the charge point or something and saying, we're gonna, you know, give you this location to install some chargers?
I don't know how it's been done in the past. The funding, the way it was originally envisioned, was half of it would come from the parking fund and then the remainder of it would come from grants. Those grants really aren't out there anymore. So right now, the funding would come from parking. But I don't know where it would go from there. If we would contract for them to be built to charge point or if we would do them ourselves, but that's,
So we have to pay charge point to do that, would be no private funding involved?
I can't speak to that.
I'm sorry to cut this short,
you're
but
good.
we only have a few minutes and I was going to suggest, Bill, could we move the New Hampshire CAP participation to next month?
There's not much to be said about that, other than they have another, probably last meeting, July 15th and 16th. And I think, Kate, you sent out the
Yeah.
information on that, and that meeting is only for, I think, summarizing all the input they've received, because they had maybe 5 sectoral groups and each one met
Right.
5 times. And then update on the funding they have in hand for heat pump grants with other New England states. And that's it. And Kate sent out that information. So if you're interested in that, there's a web Zoom meetings, the 15th and the 16th, and that's in that.
So let's get to the city council parking discussions. Can we
Yeah.
do that in 5 minutes?
I think it would be kind of hard to do that, but I think considering that the first reading of that was, guess, and Josh can fill in the blanks on
It was
this,
that
but
meeting.
It
so
was
the
that
first
meeting,
meeting
that meeting,
Six
about
nine.
2 hours earlier,
Yes.
Yeah.
about 2 hours earlier. So maybe just, I can go through these very quickly. I think that the parking is a big issue in the city. We'll go to the next one, thank you. And the current council proposal, which has evolved somewhat, was at that meeting on the 9th of June, and it was approved 5-4 with a lot of discussion and debate. Some concerns were raised by the EDC and the traffic and parking committees about that. Basically, the proposal is through the app to give 15 minutes free for residents using the app. And then some technical discussions that probably we don't have time to dig into, and I'm not sure I know the answers to that, about whether you would have to pay for a full hour, because I think you can currently pay for 15 minutes with it at a meter, but using the app becomes a kind of a technical issue on the app. Free parking for veterans and their families, which was an amendment that Josh successfully made to that. It's not included in the current city parking study, and that was a point that Kate Cook made, which is forecasting future supply and demand. They really weren't dealing with expanding free parking. the city manager's initial estimate was that this would cost $400,000 a year, but would get back with additional analysis. And as of today, I think in the Herald, the mayor was suggesting raising the parking costs for non-residents. I think the point of bringing this up at this committee is this a topic that a sustainability perspective under our ordinance, where we're advising the committee on sustainability related activities, including specifically on the cap, is that something where we've got something to offer on this? Next slide. Is it relevant for this committee? Well, looking at the ordinance, our focus is on implementation of the cap, specifically reducing greenhouse gas emissions, increasing awareness of sustainable practices, and standing for environmental justice, which is under the equity. Next slide, thank you. Applying a sustainability perspective to this parking issue. And again, we're used to talking about sustainability as involving the 3 E's of environment, economy, and equity, not one at a time, but all together, and thinking about them, trading them off, balancing them. And I guess the question, next slide, is this something that we can contribute to the discussion on free parking? Just like the EDC and the traffic and parking raised their concerns about the proposal, do we have something to offer on this? And I think it's useful for us to be thinking about it both in terms of the specific proposal, which is 15 minutes of free parking, which is kind of a small thing to add. The current app allows residents to get 75 cents an hour off. So instead of paying $2 an hour on the app, we would be paying $1.25. That's the current. So this would be an additional discount on that. So how can we apply a sustainability filter to this? And is it useful? And can we contribute that? Next slide.
Well, I think the third bullet really
Yeah.
captured it.
Yeah.
Free parking means
Yeah.
more car trips, miles.
And this gets back to the greenhouse gas reduction criteria that we were talking about, that there's really nothing in free parking that contributes to a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. It encourages more driving, more circulating for trips, and reduces funding.
So I think the key question is our role as a committee. It
Yeah.
certainly fits within the bounds of what we're lined up to do. But Josh, what do you think of an issue like this? It feels like it would be a no-win situation to take a stand against our city leadership
I
on
wouldn't
this issue.
say that, where the parking, traffic, and safety already came out against it.
Yeah.
The I don't know if it's TAC, the other committee, I forgot who came out saying,
EDC.
EDC, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, this goes against principles, so
Yeah.
it's not beyond the pale. The committee might say like, no, we're against free parking because we don't want to incentivize driving.
Right.
And the mayor gave his opinion in addressing that at this past meeting. And just to summarize, it was like, we don't have the infrastructure yet for everyone to get on their bikes and ride it downtown.
Right.
Until we have that,
Yeah.
intimate free parking. That was his opinion. Tyler, I believe you spoke about this about a month
I always
ago.
say that's have cake and eat it too. That's just demanding something exist with no incentive to produce that thing.
Saying other people's opinions.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm criticizing the mayor there.
Right.
That's basically what he said.
I think the point is that the cap discussion is not so much part of this, and that the idea that we should be talking about economy, environment, which is cap, greenhouse gas reduction, and social fairness is part of the discussion. And I think this is an example of an issue where that might be useful. Parking in general might be useful, and transportation.
And
in
I'm
general.
sorry to cut you off, Bill.
Yeah.
Colleen has her hand raised.
Yeah, hi. Just number one, agree with, again, that third bullet of free parking means more car trips. Another way to frame this from a committee perspective is that as we as a committee are putting in all of our effort and our time and our consideration to advance decarbonization, having other parts of the city be moving in the opposite direction and canceling it out. So if we're talking about, you know, would we want to say something as a committee and how would we say it? It'd be like, okay, this is not aligned with the goals that we as a committee have that we were given by the city council. Like this would be in contradiction with the long-term goals and be undoing the work that we're doing. And if other committees are already stepping up and saying that it doesn't align with their goals as well, then I think that, you know, solidarity is good. Let's do that.
And I think it isn't so much a matter of saying we oppose this as in saying, as you do the analysis of these options, we suggest that you broaden the discussion and consider sustainability. And I think that's a good precedent to be set, both on this very specific proposal, but also more generally. And I think what we've been talking about is a whole array of CAP strategies, and parking is relevant.
And we still have a quorum here, so we
Yeah,
could
we
vote
could
on
vote
it.
on
But we need
something.
the key elements of a letter that you would write.
Unfortunately, we're so tight for time, but maybe Kate, if you just flip through
I'd
the
love
slides quickly
to play a
and
little bit of devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
I think that it's important for us to continue to voice alignment with CAP and sustainability. However, I also think that we should be conscious of where our voice is going to get amplified. And when there are issues that are inherently going to be amplified in one way or the other. For example, in sustainability, what are the myths that we're constantly trying to fight against, right? One is that being sustainable is incredibly inconvenient and impossible. The other one is being sustainable is really expensive. And so if we are trying to work with our city and the residents of our city on showing that that does not always have to be the truth and that sustainability is really in our best interest in the long run, and is aligned with our city's values, when there are things like this that I don't disagree. I think it's a valuable conversation to have around the impact of these things. I just worry a little bit that we'll lose the forest for the trees by focusing on an issue that's naturally going to amplify a lot, where I worry that this is the issue that like people will see in, you know, the Herald, that
Is it possible?
Sustainability Committee took a stance on this.
Sorry to interrupt. Is it possible to write a letter that doesn't clearly
Let's
say
do the
we
next one.
oppose this measure, but we hope you're considering sustainability and the additional greenhouse gases?
This is a very rough attempt to throw some thoughts together that could be in comments from the committee, but unfortunately the timing isn't good because we're out of time on this, but
Well, can everyone stay 5 minutes more?
And we don't have to send a letter. Like it doesn't need to be
Okay, so-
something written. The other two committees didn't give anything in writing. And I could simply voice some of the
Yeah.
concerns.
I think it's just, it isn't saying this is a bad idea, don't do it, but it's just saying, as you think about a proposal like this, we as a committee encourage you to be thinking about not only what's the cost, what are the lost revenues, but also what are the impacts on the environment, specifically on the CAP and on equity. And that the relationship, I mean, this was brought up in the council discussion, the relationship between giving up money in the parking fund versus extra costs.
And I believe these slides came with the agenda, but I'm not sure.
No.
Could you resend me this
Yeah,
particular
I
slide?
was gonna
Yeah.
say it would
I
be
think
useful.
I think this method is the right direction. I would just say not tying it only to this issue.
No,
Like, you know, with any, framing it as committee would like to ensure that any conversation that has to do with parking or that might change the vehicle trips that are happening in our city, that sustainability and the
That it needs to
things
be
in the
considered.
cap are considered in
Yeah.
this, such
And-
as this, rather
and
than tying
along-
it directly.
And alongside, it isn't instead saying do bikes, don't do free parking, but
Right.
as you consider free parking, think about the importance of accessibility for people who don't have cars or choose not to drive, consistent with the cap, which has strong strategies for increasing public transit and implementing the bike ped plan.
But I think where you say about the current proposal is appropriate. We are talking about this
Yeah,
parking proposal.
yeah. So Josh, we can send you the set of the slides, but
In the
thanks,
meantime, you'll have the photo.
thanks for screenshotting it.
I don't know if we can assume that this is gonna change people's habits.
Well,
I ride my bike downtown. I'm not gonna start driving my car just because I'm gonna save 50 cents.
No, but as Donald Shoup, who's the guru of
It's a,
parking, what he says is when there's free parking and people have a car, they're gonna choose to drive.
well, people are gonna drive to, Woodbury Avenue to shop because rather than downtown Portsmouth, because it's always free.
And
So,
more likely
in
to,
terms of equity,
Yeah.
people who can't afford to park in Portsmouth don't go to Portsmouth.
Yeah.
So if to make it cheaper for residents to come downtown, then that means that people who can't afford it normally might have a chance to go to downtown instead of someplace else where there's huge parking limits.
and I think as the council discussed, the 15 minutes is probably not gonna make a big difference because there's already $1.25 instead of $2.
So I don't think we need to have a formal vote
No,
for
I
this,
don't.
but how many people, using Bert's hand, how many people would like to have Josh speak up for us, talking in terms of these points?
Yeah, as long as we're talking about, as long as we're talking about considering sustainability
Yes,
in this decision.
right.
We don't have the answers. I mean, there's some,
Right.
we could say some things about it, but we don't
Yeah.
know what the true outcome is.
And sustainability is always at risk of being a buzzword and squishy. And I think bringing up the core 3 Es together and a balance is a useful perspective to be introducing into
Yeah.
the debate. And I don't have a problem with 15-minute addition of parking, but it needs to be considered.
Well, Bill, thanks for bringing this to the committee, and I apologize that you got caught short, but I think we covered it. But are there any additional comments at this point? I'm going to move the other items to next month. Yeah. I guess since Nancy's gone,
Yes.
we need a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Great.
You going to check out or just?
Oh.